If you want to hit Legendary this season, you need to stop playing fair. There is a toxic Search and Destroy setup later in this list that guarantees a 90% win rate, but only if you use the right perks. Today, we're covering the 10 best loadouts in Season 1 2026 of Call of Duty Mobile. Whether you're a rusher, an anchor, or a toxic Search and Destroy player, we have a build for you. You don't want to miss the anti-scorestreak build at number 4, so let's get into it. First up is the aggressive respawn loadout. This is basically meant for every weapon from close quarters SMGs to flex ARs. This loadout focuses on two things: getting your operator quickly and running around the map fast. First, we run overclock to get that operator faster. The operator choice is up to you, but choose something related to your weapon. If you're going for CQB SMGs, maybe go for the equalizer. If you're using an AR or a flex weapon, go for the Annihilator, Sparrow, or Tempest, which are a lot more flexible. Next, we got Quick Fix and Dead Silence. You can never go wrong with either of those in respawns. They are always reliable. Take note, if you're playing specifically in the OBJ, you can swap Quick Fix for Vulture and Dead Silence for survival training. Lastly, we're using the Skulker perk as our second red perk. It gives you better strafing speed, which is something we're never gonna regret. For lethal and tactical, I go for Semtex and Smoke Grenade, but you can use whatever suits your playstyle. Stun, Flash, Trophy, Molotov, Contact Grenade, C4, you name it. For the score streaks, I'm using the usual UAV, Shock RC, and Advanced UAV. Again, we can never go wrong with these three in respawns. This build is great for speed, but what if you need to slow down and hold a power position? That is where loadout number 2 comes in. Next up, we got the Flex Response loadout. This is for any weapon between the Flex SMG and classical AR. Here we are going with Dauntless as our red perk. Since we're playing at a slightly slower pace, we're probably gonna go against Man-O-War Thermites and this counters them. The rest of the loadout is basically the same, adaptable for every aspect. However, I prefer to go with a trophy system with this loadout as I'm more inclined to play for strategic points that are subject to grenade lineups. And I'm playing a Molotov to escape and reposition against SMGs, which might push me and catch me off guard. Third is the Passive Response loadout, designed for any weapon from the classic AR to the LMG. Since we're supposed to die less with this playstyle, instead of a double red perk, I'm going for an additional score streak which I have more chances to get. So, in addition to the usual big 3, I'm using an EMP system. This is incredibly useful against persistent score streaks like Swarms or RAPS, which aren't easily destroyable. Since we want to farm score streaks, we're using Hardline as our blue perk. For the red and green perks, I go for Dauntless and Quick Fix. As an alternative, you'd also be good with something like Restock or Pinpoint as your red perk and Ghost as your green perk. That setup is probably better for strictly getting score streaks, but a little bit worse for playing for the win. The Operator, Lethal, and Tactical are up to you. But if you're playing with Restock, I advise you to use a Trip Mine as it'll give you free kills. For the Operator, something good at long range like the Annihilator is preferred, as it's your best pick to get kills at distance without taking too many risks. But even the best passive player gets destroyed by score streaks eventually, unless you have this next loadout in your back pocket. The anti-scorestreak loadout is something you always need to have in your back pocket. To build it, you start with the EMP grenade to deal with Goliaths, sentry guns, and SAM turrets. Pair that with thermites to melt anything stationary. For your perks, Cold-Blooded is non-negotiable, so you avoid getting targeted by automatic score streaks. You also want Dauntless to avoid getting killed by Man-O-War Thermite users while you try to blow stuff up. Alternatively, you can run Flak Jacket if you want to survive explosion damage from streaks like the VTOL. For the Operator, bring the Tempest, which is perfect for taking out Goliaths and Juggernauts. And most importantly, you need a Man-O-War Thermite to destroy everything else. Finally, add a second gun to play with after you're done destroying score streaks. I picked the USS-9, but honestly, it can be anything you like. Now that we've mastered respawns, we need to talk about S&D. These next builds will drastically increase your round win rate. For our first two S&D loadouts, which we'll call the fair ones, I picked the VMP and the HVK-30 as my two guns. But honestly, it can be basically anything aside from snipers and shotguns. The base setup is simple. First, grab the standard S&D score streak trio: UAV, Shock RC, and the Hunter Killer Drone. You also want a reliable secondary weapon in case you run out of ammo. For perks, lightweight is essential to run faster for those rotations and initial pushes. Pair that with gung ho so you can reload while sprinting. That'll save your life more times than you can count. And obviously, you need dead silence. For the last perk, I use Tactician. This lets you double up on smokes, flashes, or concussions. I highly advise you to stick to those 3 tacticals, as they are honestly the strongest for a fair play loadout. Finally, for the lethal, I usually go for the Semtex, but a contact grenade or a frag grenade for lineups work just as well. One side note, you can use restock instead of Tactician, but that starts to get a little more toxic. Okay, we played nice. Now, let's stop being fair. If you want to make the enemy rage quit, you need these next 2 builds. For our 3rd and 4th S&D loadouts, which we'll call the toxic ones, we are changing the strategy entirely. First, you need to pick 2 complementary guns, one for short range and one for long range. For loadout 7, I use the Tundra paired with the VMP. For loadout 8, I run the CX9 burst with the SO14. Once you have the guns, equip a trip mine and a trip sensor combined with the restock perk. This means you never run out of annoying utility. Run toughness and dead silence. If you aren't running a marksman or sniper, you can swap toughness for gung ho, but I prefer the flinch resistance here. The strategy is simple. Throw as many trip mines and trip sensors as physically possible, hold your lines, and that will basically get you to a 90% win rate in search and destroy. Now, for a pure sniper loadout, your score streak should be adapted depending on the mode, and the secondary is basically up to you. Just don't run a launcher. For your equipment, I go for a Semtex and a trophy system in S&D. If I'm in respawn, I swap the trophy for a smoke grenade. For the perks, it depends on the game mode. If you're playing S&D, Iron Lungs and Toughness are highly recommended to hit those precise shots. If you're playing respawn, you can swap those for Amped or Quick Fix, and Agile is usually better than Iron Lungs for aggressive play. For the other 2 slots, nothing beats lightweight and dead silence. And finally, for the operator, you can either go for an enhancer like kinetic armor or the misdirection device, or just grab a slayer operator like the equalizers, annihilator, or tempest. Lastly, we have the shotgun loadouts. Just like the sniper, adapt your score streaks for respawn or S&D, and pick any secondary that isn't a launcher. For the lethal choice, the contact grenade is probably the best pick. However, the Molotov also does an incredible job to throw behind you when you don't want to get chased. For the perks, lightweight, gung ho, and dead silence are the obvious 3. For the 4th one, you can use Tactician or restock. I prefer Tactician here because when I need a smoke, flash, or stun to close the gap, I usually need 2 just to be sure. Pro tip, you can also go for stim shots as they're incredibly useful when you are a headless running chicken without any health related perks. For the operator, just use an equalizer or a tempest. You're already running gung ho, which makes both of those operators incredible picks, so don't waste it. Those are the 10 essential loadouts for Season 1. Now, you might have noticed I had the Annihilator equipped for almost every single one of these clips. That is just my personal comfort pick. But if you want to know which operator skill is statistically the best for your specific playstyle, and which ones are actually worth your time, you need to watch this ranking on the right.